Welcome, everyone, to Inquire Live at Gameday Central alongside EJ Smith. I am Olivia Reiner. We are here at SoFi Stadium gearing up for the Eagles game against the Los Angeles Rams. EJ, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Olivia. I feel like I'm in a spaceship. Like I texted my wife and said I feel like I'm about to be like lifted off into a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Really cool stadium. Excited for the game. Yeah, really, no complaints. Excited for the show.
It's crazy. This place is massive and beautiful and lots of just natural lighting in here as well. Hopefully we
It's
look
good for the
extra
show. Yeah,
glamorous today. So
I'm
we have a
always
whole
glamorous. Yeah.
you are. We know that's a given, EJ. We have a whole lot to discuss with all of you. However, before we get into today's conversation, we want you to be a part of it as well. You can head over to inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. That's where you can leave your questions, your comments, whatever's on your mind. I don't know about you, EJ, but this is personally one of my favorite segments of the show just because we get to hear from our lovely audience as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was my line originally. That it's my favorite segment, so I feel a little bit that got hijacked from me. But I agree, it's definitely the best segment. So.
You're supposed to let me steal it, EJ. Come on. All right, let's get into our very first segment of the show that we like to call Health Report. We're going to talk about some of the players that we know for sure. We're waiting for the inactives list to come out officially, but let's talk about some of the players that we know for sure are not playing today. First off, starting right guard Cam Jurgens is out with a foot injury. He's already been placed on injured reserve, so he'll miss at least the next 4 games. Defensive tackle Fletcher Cox is inactive today. That's a big one. He's dealing with a back issue, so we'll see exactly how long that is going to affect him, but at least for today's game, not playing. Safety Sidney Brown still dealing with a hamstring injury. This is his second straight game that he won't be playing. And then defensive lineman Marlon Tuipulotu is dealing with a triceps injury. So quite a long list there, EJ, of players that we know are not going to be in today's game. What stands out to you?
Well, I think 2 things. The depth at defensive tackle is a big one. Fletcher Cox was leading that position group in snaps in the first 4 games, and I think that that probably isn't necessarily how he saw his role this season. I think that is part of the reason why he got dinged up here. So him and Marlon Tuipulotu both being out. That's been one of the strengths of this Eagles team is defensive tackle depth and being able to roll guys in. Jalen Carter, as impactful as he's been, he hasn't been an every down player. I think he's, been more in that Javon Hargrave situational pass rushers type of role. And I think that having him in that role has been beneficial for him because he can kind of, be fresh on those important downs. So, you're going to see more of Jalen Carter. You're going to see more of Jordan Davis, who has struggled with conditioning in the past. He's looked good this year, obviously. But yeah, the defensive tackle depth definitely stands out. And then on the other side, Cam Jurgens being out, he was playing really well at right guard after making that switch from center to guard in the summer. And I think that, Sua Opeta played really well against Washington, against a really good Washington interior defensive line. And it's like, good job, Sua. Now you get to go against one of the best players in the history of the game at defensive tackle in Aaron Donald. So, definitely puts the onus on Sua there. I think that the Eagles' depth at both of those spots should be able to help them. But yeah, that's definitely what stands out when you look at their injury report going into the game.
The Eagles' offensive line versus the Rams' defensive front, specifically Aaron Donald. That is certainly going to be a matchup to watch. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. We don't have the inactives list yet. However, wide receiver Quez Watkins is expected to make a return from a hamstring injury. And then safety Justin Evans, who had been dealing with a neck injury. He did not play last week. He is also expected to be active. I guess the big question with Quez Watkins coming back is that in the slot, Olamide Zaccheaus has had a lot of success, got his first touchdown the other week, and he's been racking up some yards, made some big catches. Just really impressive play from someone who came and wasn't on this team last year. EJ, where do you think the Eagles stand right now at slot receiver, and who deserves the most snaps?
Yeah, I think Olamide Zaccheaus has earned himself playing time in the last couple of weeks. You mentioned the production. He's had some big catches and big moments, and that's always something that you want to keep an eye out for because it's like, he's new to this team, and Jalen Hurts obviously trusts him. He went to him on a key third down in overtime, and to have those high leverage moments for a newcomer is definitely important. And then you also have to mention he has been an effort guy, and I think that's really important. I pointed this out last week. He was sprinting down the field to block for A.J. Brown on his first touchdown against Washington. That type of effort does not go unnoticed by the coaches. Passing game coordinator Kevin Patullo actually mentioned it on the Eagles, their pregame game plan YouTube show. He pointed out that Olamide had that effort on that play. Coaches appreciate that type of stuff, and especially with this Eagles offense, with the three guys kind of already well established, they need guys who are going to embrace that role. I think Olamide Zaccheaus is the type of guy who has embraced a role like that. So you listen, Quez Watkins obviously, does a lot to impact defenses. You have to keep a safety over the top of him because of that speed, but it's not like the Eagles don't have speed from Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. So, I think you're going to see both of them. I think that Quez offers a little bit of versatility that Olamide doesn't. Olamide is more of a slot specific receiver, whereas Quez, you could put him on the outside and he's still viable from those spots. With as much as the Eagles like to have AJ Brown or Devontae Smith in the slot, I think you are still going to see Quez now that he's healthy. But again, I think that Olamide has definitely earned some playing time the last few games.
Something certainly to keep an eye on there, who bears the bulk of the workload there in the slot. Another player that we're expecting to be active today is punt returner / wide receiver Britton Covey, who sustained a concussion last weekend. And that's, good for the Eagles to have their top stringer there. And then, of course, from the practice squad, we're going to see punter Braden Mann elevated, most likely. Or we already have that information. Even though we're waiting for the inactives, but he will be certainly elevated. And then cornerback Bradley Roby has also been elevated from the practice squad as well. Roby was just brought in off the street to play and to be the Eagles slot corner. EJ, how much do you realistically think he will play today, given the fact that he's only been learning this defense for the last few days?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not it's an unenviable task to have to learn, a defensive system in just a few days. But I think you will see him play some. I think that there's going to be situations where the Eagles are going to want James Bradberry in the slot, I would imagine. The Rams are really creative in their usage in the slot. But I do think that there are going to be also times where they want James Bradberry lined up on the outside, whether it's against Van Jefferson or Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua, whoever it may be. Like, I think that it's going to be matchup dependent. I don't think that he's going to play 100% of the snaps, Nick Sirianni talks about how football shape is different than, just being in good shape from working out in the off season. So yeah, I definitely think that he's going to have a role today. I think he's going to play some, but I don't think he's going to be like a every down player for them. I think it's interesting. It's worthwhile to take a shot on a guy like that. Someone who has that experience and, also has the versatility to play inside and outside. So I think that you'll see more of him as the weeks progress. I think he's going to get a real chance here to lock down a job.
The inactives list is out, and there are no surprises. So quarterback Tanner McKee is not playing. Safety Sidney Brown inactive, as we already knew. Running back Rashad Penny is inactive. Tight end Albert Okwebanam is inactive. Defensive tackle Fletcher Cox and defensive tackle Marlon Tuipulotu. So again, not many surprises there. I think we were expecting the vast majority of these inactives, but certainly that's kind of the picture and what the Eagles are dealing with some injuries, but it's the next man up. You'll see who is able to contribute in today's game. Let's switch over to today's headlines. There's lots of storylines to talk about, and EJ, you've already kind of touched on just the receiving strength that this Rams team have, especially considering the fact that wide receiver Cooper Kupp is expected to play today, which is going to be a boon for the receiving game there for the Rams. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury. He was on injured reserve, expected to play today. He only played 9 games last season, but he averaged 90.2 yards per game, which ranked 3rd in the league, a very talented receiver. And then, of course, the Rams also have another very talented receiver in Puka Nacua, who is also off to just really an incredible start to the season. 39 receptions for 501 yards, which are both the most in NFL history through 4 career games. So not too shabby. Combine those two with Matthew Stafford, who's off to a very strong start this season as well. Where does this particular challenge, rank among the challenges that the Eagles have faced so far?
It's a good question. I think that Matt Stafford is pretty easily the best quarterback they faced, and this is one of the better receiving cores. Now, listen, this is what makes this receiving core even more dangerous than it is on paper. Is Sean McVay kind of running the show? All of the pre-snap motion and all of the deception, all of the things that go into playing a team that comes from this Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay tree of offenses, especially against a defense that does have moving parts. Bradley Roby, maybe trying to integrate himself in here. The linebacking core, they've been playing better, but they're still new to the team. And then movement at safety, with injuries and just generally uncertainty at those spots. That's definitely where Sean McVay has been watching. I don't think it takes a football genius to realize like that's probably where he's going to try and take advantage of things. And I think that there's going to be a challenge for the Eagles defense to stay disciplined and be able to kind of counteract and, figure out, diagnose what's going on before the snap, being in the right spot, post snap. So definitely a big challenge. Stafford's the type of quarterback that can get hot. It's the type of quarterback that, with the previous defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, I think a lot of us would be saying this is a big test for him because he struggled against good quarterbacks. I think this will be a big test for Sean Desai as well. Stafford's the kind of guy that has seen a lot of things. You can't, keep the picture the same against him. I don't think that Desai has that tendency as much as Gannon does in terms of staying vanilla and kind of not mixing the look up pre-snap and post-snap, but it's still going to be a big challenge. Again, there's a lot of talent on the perimeter, and, Matt Stafford, I think he's been resurgent this year after, I think some people wrote him off last year. He dealt with injury. This year, I watched, the game against the Colts last weekend, and he looks like the same Matt Stafford that you're used to seeing. So definitely a big challenge for the Eagles defense coming up.
You mentioned discipline, EJ. It's a good point. Our colleague Jeff McClain earlier this week wrote about the fact how the Eagles inside linebackers, Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham, this past week in particular against the Washington Commanders, were disciplined and didn't bite on much of the kind of the pre-snap motion that Washington tried to employ as well. So we'll see if they're able to continue that trend into today's game. Let's take a look now at the Eagles offense, talking about the Eagles passing game in particular, which I know we have talked about a lot so far this season. I think, at least on paper, the Eagles passing game took a step last week, particularly Jalen Hurts. You look at his stats coming out of week 4, season high 112.3 passer rating, completing 67.6 of his passes for a season high 319 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had 6 receptions of 20 plus yards. So, these are all good steps in the right direction. But what is the next step for the Eagles offense to prove that they are as dominant as they were last year?
Yeah, I think that we've started to see them, get back to their explosive ways from last season. You're starting to see them, hit on those 20 plus completions, as you mentioned, especially at AJ Brown. You're starting to see the offense kind of be able to figure that part out. I think the next step is the success rate. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but Jalen Hurts' success rate is, bottom half of the league. That's something that I think is why it feels in the moment like the offense isn't really where it was last year. But then you look back at the numbers and it's like, well, he threw for over 300 yards and, had a couple big time plays and, some really impressive throws. But I think it's like the down and down out stuff. Again, success rate measures how often you're staying ahead of the chains, how often you're getting enough yardage to get you to a first down, in 3 downs. So, that's something that they have to work on. I think, it's like kind of, again, that consistency throughout the game. But listen, that's always, I think every offense wants to be more consistent. Every offense wants to stay ahead of the chains. What it really comes down to is, do you have the talent to make the plays necessary to win the game? We've seen the Eagles have that on offense. Again, I think that against the better teams, it's going to be important that they can sustain drives, that they can convert in the red zone. That's a big part of the success rate as well, is that when things condense, there's the explosive plays aren't going to bail you out. It's a matter of, can you get consistent gains? So, I think that's the next step for them. I think that they're happy that they're 4-0 and they still haven't quite figured that out. And I think that, there's time for them to figure it out. So.
The Eagles certainly have the talent to have a dominant offense between Hurts and running back DeAndre Swift and all 3 of the core receivers, including A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. However, a lot of this game could come down to one key matchup that we already touched on just a little bit: defensive tackle Aaron Donald versus the Eagles offensive line, particularly taking a look at that right guard spot with Cam Jurgens out and Sua Opeta in. You look at Aaron Donald, he has 9 pressures in 4 games, which is tied for second in the league with none other than the Eagles' very own Jalen Carter, who is first. Fletcher Cox, he leads the league with 10. Cox isn't playing. Donald is. How are the Eagles going to even just attempt to slow Aaron Donald down today?
Yeah, you ask guys around the locker room throughout the week, and they always say, like, we're going to know where he is on every play. And it's like, well, it's easy to find him. It's harder to stop him. But, it is worth noting that the Eagles did well against Aaron Donald the last time that they played the Rams, which was, a few seasons ago. Some of that is really just double team him every play. And I think the thing about the Eagles offensive line in particular is that they have the talent across the board where they can slide two guys to Aaron Donald and be comfortable that the one-on-one matchup on the opposite side isn't going to be a problem, and I think if you're the Rams, you want Aaron Donald lined up over Sua Opeta today, to try and test him out. But if Jason Kelsey and Sua Opeta are double teaming Aaron Donald, you feel pretty good about Landon Dickerson one-on-one on the other side. So I think that that's the formula for the Eagles. I think that's how they're going to try to stop him. Listen, every team has a plan for Aaron Donald at the beginning of the game, and Aaron Donald has 3 sacks in the last 4 games. So it's easier said than done. I think that the Eagles have the talent to suggest that he's not going to wreck the game in the way that he is capable of doing. But no, I mean, they're going to have their hands full. Again, like we mentioned Sua Opeta at the top of the show, like it really is I've used unenviable once before in the show, and I'm going to use it again here. Like it is unenviable to go from Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne to Aaron Donald on the road. So definitely a tough assignment. I think the Eagles are going to have a plan for him. Whether or not that plan really works 100% of the time, I mean, most teams are not going to stop him 100% of the time. It's like the ultimate sign of respect, right? You can only hope to contain him. So, that's what I expect. And, I don't think, again, I wouldn't expect him to wreck the game. I don't think that's going to be a 4 sack. They can't get anything going offensively, but he's going to get his. He's that type of player. So.
All right, we will see how the Eagles attempt to limit Aaron Donald, but let's continue our conversation by going to my personal favorite segment of the show, and EJ's as well. I might have stolen it from him. It is the Fan Zone. We will start with C.W. Berkwith. Thank you so much for your question here. We've got a good one. Why so many snaps for Fletcher Cox so far this season? He was tired in the fourth quarter against Washington. Fletcher Cox has continued to be leaned upon as a starter, and he's taking the bulk of the defensive snaps, even though, there's some younger players at the position as well, looking for more playing time perhaps as the season goes on in in Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. EJ, why, at least early on right now, is Fletcher Cox being relied upon so much on the defensive line?
Yeah, it's interesting because, if you had asked me before the season where Fletcher Cox would rank in snap percentage, I would not have guessed he would be the highest on the Eagles' defensive tackle rotation. I think some of that is being able to bring Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis along. I think both of them have a specialized role right now where, Jalen Carter is kind of a pass situation specialist, a pass rusher. First and foremost, and I think Jordan Davis is early downs a lot of the time, but that's going to have to change. I mean, they're both first round picks, and they're both playing well. So I think that they both can take some more of that load. And I think it's fair to say that Fletcher Cox was tired. I think he would tell you himself that he was tired, playing that many games. I mean, he came off from the Washington game grabbing his back, and you kind of had a sense something might be up there. So I think that that's a big part of this is bringing those guys along. They have enough guys that can do the dirty work. Now, listen, Marlon Toi-Pulotu being out is going to hurt that a little bit. But a guy like Milton Williams, guys like Contavia Street, you can put some, they can kind of, work them in a little bit more. I'm sure that Sean Desai would say that the way the games went is part of it, more important downs, high leverage situations than maybe they expected. But yeah, I don't really think that that's a sustainable formula to have Fletcher Cox being your leading snap taker at defensive tackle, especially when you have these 2 young guys who are making an impact.
We will see how this back issue too affects Fletcher Cox's workload going forward. But it's certainly a good question, C.W. Berkwith. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Let's take a question here from Retired at 58. Good to see you again. Congratulations
it's our guy.
Again for retiring at 58. That's wonderful. They say that they are not confident that the Eagles secondary will contain the Rams wide receivers. Defensive coordinator Sean Desai plays such a soft secondary. At some point, the Eagles will lose because of it, and this will be the game if Desai does so again. EJ, what do you think so far of the defense that Sean Desai is running, particularly when you look at the coverage in the secondary?
Yeah, it's funny. I went back to that Washington fourth quarter drive where they tied the game up, and I was really trying to figure out what went wrong. You have 2 minutes to win the game. You just got to get them off the field, and they had a 3rd and long situation that they converted on 4th down later. I think it is a mixture of the soft coverages. I think that in a couple of cases they were a little bit too worried about stopping the explosive plays and kind of giving up underneath routes as a result. I do think some of it is also they are dealing with injuries in the secondary, and I think that they haven't quite figured out which matchups they can trust and which ones they, kind of have to insulate a little bit more. So I think that's a big part of it. I don't disagree with the notion, though. Like, if they're going to come out and be 10 yards off of these guys all game, like, the Rams are, they're one of these teams that can get a lot of yards after catch. Being in soft coverages is going to leave them open to that type of thing. So it's a big test for Sean Desai, for sure. These are the types of quarterbacks and coaches that, you expect the Eagles to really need to be able to succeed against, and I think that, like I said, it's going to be a big test to see how he does against that.
Whether the game plan is any different, we'll find out shortly. However, we do know that the personnel at the very least could look a little bit different this week with Justin Evans returning at safety, plus the addition of Bradley Roby. How many snaps is he going to play in the slot, giving James Bradbury potentially an opportunity to move outside and potentially also take some reps in the slot as well. So something to certainly keep an eye on. Retired at 58. Thank you so much for your question. Finally, we have one question from the Brew Crew 99 over on Twitter. Sorry about your Milwaukee Brewers. They ask, what is ESP's 40 time? Elliot Shore Parks of WIP. It's a good question. He's somewhere in the press box. We could go find him, or even better, we could ask.
What's your 40 time?
40.
I mean, I feel like a 4.9.
He says he's a 4.9. I'm gonna detract at least a tenth of a second. I'd say he's lucky to hit a 5.
I think
he's not a 4.9. Jimmy Kemsky from Philly Voice reports that he is not a 4.9, and I trust my sources on that one. So I'm going to give him a 5.1 based off of that emphatic 5.3. All right, 5.3. We'll go 5.3. The whole press box is shouting about Elliot's claimed 4.9 40 time. We know that Elliot can sometimes overstate his athletic feats or what he might be able to achieve. So we're going to go 5.3. I appreciate the question. This was good.
It's a good one. I think 5.3 is pretty fair. I don't think a sub 5 second 40, that's
we're not that young anymore, like when we in high school, well, you might run a 5 or a 5.1, but you're not running every day. You're not sprinting, especially. It's no joke. So yeah, I think 5.3 is respectful. It's respectable.
All right. Well, we'll have to get him to actually prove that he can run a 4.9 one of these days. We'll get him out on the track, on the field somewhere. If we have to do it in the press box, I'm totally fine with that as well. All right. Well, thank you to Elliot for being such a good sport. Let's transition over to my other favorite personal segment, our predictions. But before we talk about our personal predictions for today's game, let us hear from our colleague, Jeff McClain.
Hi, I'm Jeff McClain, Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer and podcast host of Uncovering the Birds, which you can listen to anywhere you get your podcasts. All right, the Eagles, week 5, and they're traveling out to LA to face the Rams, who are 2-2. This, I think, before the season was a game that many people marked down as a W. I'm not so sure that that's going to be the case. You still have a great coach in Sean McVay. You still have a very good quarterback who can sling it in Matthew Stafford. And while they're down at certain positions, most significantly at slot wide receiver with Cooper Kupp, they seem to have found some sort of formula here and a new guy in Puka Nacua who is among the leaders in receptions and receiving yards. And I think will give this Eagles team all that they can handle, especially at the slot position where they really don't have an answer yet since Avonte Maddox's season-ending injury. Now, James Bradbury, I think, did pretty well against the Buccaneers, but the Washington Commanders last week were able to kind of attack him. And not only him, I think both cornerbacks didn't have their best games with Josh Jobe and Darius Slay. So there could be some positional change there. But I think what the Eagles need to do defensively is really have strong eye discipline. Sean McVay is known for a lot of motion at the snap. He wants to kind of get those linebackers and safeties off their keys. And while the Eagles linebackers, I think, have played very well recently, Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham, they're going to be tested in this game against a very good scheme at the safety position. The Eagles should have Justin Evans back along Reed Blankenship, so that should upgrade what they have. But again, this is a game that should focus on the defensive front of the Eagles, and I think they have another clear advantage here against the Rams. On the other side of the ball, the Eagles offense passing was at its best last week, and Jalen Hurts looked like the Jalen Hurts of 2022 with the arm and also one time with the legs. He scrambled for 24 yards dynamically on a third down. Now, Hurts, when he gets out in the open, teams have been kind of spying him and making sure that he doesn't run as much, and he's trying to protect himself. So that's something I think the Eagles have to navigate here and have to get used to, with Hurts not running as much on design runs. But look, when you talk about the Rams offense, you got to start number one with Aaron Donald. And the last time the Eagles played the Rams, they were able to pretty much shut him down. And I remember asking Jason Kelsey after the game, well, how'd you do it? He's like, well, we doubled him pretty much every snap. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Eagles do that. And they're probably going to have to do it with Cam Jurgens out with a foot injury, and you got Sua Opeta in there. And while Opeta jumped into that game against the Commanders and did well, you can bet that the Rams are going to really try and switch things up with that front and try and free Aaron Donald against him and get one-on-one situation. If that happens, then Jalen Hurts is going to have Aaron Donald in his lap, and that could blow up a bunch of plays. But I think the Eagles, Jeff Stoutland, Jason Kelsey, they're as good as they come with that front. I think they're going to find another way to kind of keep Aaron Donald under wraps. Not probably the entire game. He usually gets his. He may get a sack or here or there, but that offensive line is good. I think there's opportunities for the Eagles to throw the ball downfield. So I see them winning this one. I'm not going to say comfortably, but I could see them winning by somewhere in the 7 to 6 point margin. All right, guys, back to you at Gameday Central. I'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for your thoughts on today's game. EJ, now it is your turn to break out the crystal ball. A 6 to 7 point win for the Eagles, at least from Jeff's perspective. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tight game. I thought about picking the Rams in this one. The Eagles just haven't really played a complete game. That's what's hard about predicting this, because it's like, if they play their best football, they have enough matchup advantages, enough talent advantages to, win comfortably. But, long flight, road game against a team that has overachieved a little bit, at least by my standards. I thought that the Rams would be, kind of desperate for a rebuild at this point. And I think that they've played better than I expected the first 4 weeks. So I had 28-24. I think there's going to be points in this game. I almost went higher on points. I still, maybe I'll amend that for our Game Day Central viewers. You get a little extra from what the prediction says in the paper today. Maybe I'll go 31-27. Still same margin, but I do think there are going to be points. I think that the Eagles defense isn't going to be able to just shut out this Rams offense for the reasons we mentioned earlier. I think the Eagles offense will be able to score against this Rams defense. Again, Aaron Donald is an incredible player who is going to impact the game at some point. But if you look at across the rest of the Rams depth chart, I think that, there's definitely some favorable matchups, especially on the outside, outside of the field, with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, not to spoil my player to watch here. But I think the Eagles are going to be able to exploit those matchups, put up points. Again, I could see this game going into the fourth quarter. I could see this game being tight late. But yeah, I think the Eagles will eke it out. I'll go 31-28, an amendment from my Inquirer prediction there. So.
All right. You get the exclusive from EJ Smith on our show. So EJ, thank you for, it happens. You think a little bit more, you sleep on it, and then overnight it comes to you. No, I should have made this prediction.
It's not like I just send in the prediction. I just stop thinking, I gotta keep processing all the information. So.
I completely understand. You can put all the logic in the world into these predictions. However, at the end of the day, anything can happen and you never really know. However, that said, I think EJ, I took a similar route to my prediction as well. I have the Eagles coming out on top today, 29-27. I think I've been encouraged by the offense, and I've been encouraged by Jalen Hurts. I think he's gradually taking steps every single week and improving and figuring out, listen, we've heard from various offensive players throughout the season so far that defenses are really throwing a lot of chaos at them. And I think that them figuring everything out right away, it's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. However, they have been taking steps. Jalen Hurts had his best game of the year so far last weekend. So perhaps today, when they're finally in a dome, no weather elements, they've dealt with some strange weather and rain and wind and things like that, unseasonable heat as well, playing outdoors. So perhaps they've got a controlled climate. They only flew out yesterday, and I think maybe they're going to try to stay on East Coast time. So I push back on on the I push back on the notion that the long flight is really going to throw them off extensively. So I've got a narrow win for the Eagles here, 29-27, and we will see exactly what happens in just a matter of time. So let's transition now to our final segment of the show, our players to watch. We're going to be watching all sorts of players, and we've talked about Aaron Donald extensively. We've talked about the Rams receivers, even quarterback Matthew Stafford off to a strong start this season. However, when it comes to the Eagles, EJ, who are you going to be zeroing in on in today's game?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I'm going to go Devontae Smith. AJ Brown's had a couple of big games here. I think Raheem Mostert's a really good defensive coordinator. I'm sure he's going to have a good plan for AJ Brown and the Eagles offense in general. But I mean, at some point, it comes down to matchups. It comes down to what you can do against a more talented side. And I think that's where Devontae Smith comes into play. If the Rams start to deploy a lot of attention over to AJ Brown, whether it's cover one double or even just deploying, it's hard. Like the Rams don't have that number one corner anymore. But I mean, Darion Kendrick is playing better than Ahkello Witherspoon, at least by PFF metrics and everything like that. So, I think that Devontae Smith is going to be the beneficiary of that. A little bit less attention paid to him. I think he could have a big game. I think it's going to be one of the Eagles' receiving threats. Whether it's receivers or Dallas Goedert at tight end. I think that's who I'm going to go with, is Devontae Smith.
You teed me up very nicely there, EJ. I
yeah.
appreciate it. We've got my personal person to watch that I'll be keeping an eye on. And I might even add in a 1B too. But 1A for me is Dallas Goedert. Through the first 4 games of the season, he's only got 19 targets for 13 receptions for 88 yards, which ranks 3rd on the team behind, as you would expect, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So it makes sense that the breakdown of the targets are going the way that they are. But I think we would all expect at this point for Goedert to be a little bit more involved in the passing game. Coach Nick Sirianni has raved about the work that Goedert has done in the run game and run blocking, and surely that is a valuable part of what this Eagles offense does as well. However, the Eagles also have one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the game in Goedert, and surely if they want to take full advantage of all of the tools that they have on offense, they're going to want to get Goedert involved. So my eyes are going to be on him in today's game. Plus, I think on defense, cornerback Bradley Roby, we'll see exactly how much he gets involved, how many snaps he takes, and how his presence allows the Eagles defense to be better. Just having James Bradberry back more at his natural position. The Eagles have taken a risk by not necessarily, it's tough. You kind of make yourself weaker at 2 positions when you move someone even as talented as James Bradberry out of his natural position and you put him in the slot. Now, not only are they having, trying to navigate the slot position, but now they've also got Josh Jobe trying to navigate the outside corner role as well, and not having nearly as much experience, of course. So certainly something to keep an eye on there as well. All right, everybody, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much tuning in to Inquire Live at Gameday Central. It is not the end of the show, so to speak. It is the end of our show. However, you can continue to interact with us throughout the game. Head on over to inquire.com/Eagles Gameday to follow along. We're going to be posting and commenting live, having a conversation with all of you. So we look forward to that, and I'll see you over there.
Yeah, and also remember to stay up to date on all of our Inquire Sports coverage by subscribing to our Sports Daily newsletter. You'll see our most recent articles along with other Phillies, Sixers, and college sports coverage. A lot of Phillies coverage these days. It's a big time for Phillies playoff runs and everything like that. So a lot of articles referenced throughout the segment will be there.
You can also keep up with Philly's most seasoned beat reporter on Uncovering the Birds with Jeff McClain. You can listen to that podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to inquire.com/podcasts. All right, everybody, that is all for today. Thank you so much for tuning into Gameday Central.